So when you were born into this world, the first thing that you did to communicate with the outside world was sound and movement. And over time, what starts happening is you are overshadowed by cognitive reasoning, analytical thinking, social conditioning, and you start getting further and further away from your primal self. So right now, all of you, for 2 seconds, just hummed and moved your hands without any kind of influence or plan. And I could see that all of you were laughing and really enjoyed yourself. Did you not? Yes. All right. So what happens is over time, as we grow older and older and we start going to school and we start learning how to behave and how to sit and how to stand and how to walk, we start getting further and further away from our true primal selves. So if you look before the evolution of language, cavemen used the arts or art to describe everything. Art was used to describe issues of oppression, issues of community. They used art to describe their daily lives. They used art to show fear, to show solidarity, community. And art was even used for tribes to kind of find a way to identify themselves. So there was a lot of identity and self-expression where art was concerned. And there was no prerequisite, and there was no ki main acha draw kar sakta hu ki nahi. It's whatever is naturally coming is art for all of us. Even if you look at sound, prayers or chants or mantras that have been with us for centuries and centuries, if you break it down, are essentially sound vibrations. And these sound vibrations represent the divine or represent God. And that eventually gets manifested into becoming something of a reality. So I'm sure you all hear ki if you pray and pray and pray and you put your mind along with your prayer, some things actually manifest. So if you break it down, sound vibrations actually have a lot of power in this regard. The shamans or the medicine men many years ago, they used sound and movement to actually heal people. There were no medicines and drugs and everything out there around that time. They just used the sound of the drum and movement. And they believed that by alleviating traumas of the mind or the soul, a physical body could actually have balance and wholeness. So healing was done from the mind and the soul to the body. Now let's fast forward many, many, many years later. And we're now in the 1900s. And the 1900s, the pharmaceutical industry has completely gone skyrocketing. Billions and billions of dollars are spent every day in researching new advancements in science, new cures, new vaccinations, new mutations. And it's amazing how we've developed ourselves in this field. But my only humble plea would be is if we spent even 2% of those $1 billion in actually researching our own ancient practices of healing and methods that our ancestors used while they sat on this wealth of knowledge that is being completely lost in today's society. So along with the allopathic industry, you also have these other huge industries like the marketing industry, the beauty industry, which is taking us very, very far away from the primal selves that we actually are. The ideals of beauty are all extremely fake and extremely unreasonable. And we must not get very swayed by such kinds of thoughts. So, little later on in the 1900s, in about 1930, after the Great Depression, the Second World War happened, and people really needed an avenue to kind of break through and find some sort of sense of expression. So people were shattered and they were traumatized by what had happened after the war. They saw millions of people dying, they saw such violence. They could not even speak about what was happening in their lives. They were so traumatized. And this is where art came back into our lives as a form of medicine. So after the World War, in rehabilitation centers, in mental health hospitals, in normal hospitals, people started valuing art again because art was a means for people to start communicating the kind of trauma that they had witnessed, because words could not describe what they had witnessed. Here are some of the images from the Second World War where people used art to talk about what their feelings were. Soon after this, in the 1960s, people were still looking for an avenue to break through and release the kind of oppression that they were going through. And in 1960, there were these famous modern dancers called Martha Graham, Isadora Duncan, and many others, who said that dance is not only choreography. People should dance out their own feelings. So as a result of what started happening, they rejected the very strict ballet rules where everything had to be perfect and everything had to be stylized. And they said, no, let's use dance and movement to actually express how we feel. And this is where movement and dance started being accepted as a means to self-express. I have a quick video clip to show you in one of my sessions. This is a bunch of women, and this is to give you an idea of how dance therapy looks in terms of the modern dance kind. So they've just spoken about their names, and then they've been asked to put their names into movement. And the lady in the white kurta is actually the one who's the main dancer. And she is performing out the meaning of her name without planning it. So there's no choreography, there's nothing. Her name happens to be Kamla, which means the lotus flower. And this is the feeling that she is associated with her name. And she's just expressing and dancing out the emotions attached to her name. So dance therapy is used for all kinds of populations. All of us sitting in this room will benefit from dance therapy, along with, you have people on wheelchairs, you have people who have illnesses. But while I was training to be a dance therapist, I realized that you could have some kind of physical deformity or some kind of trauma that's stored in the body, which actually affects your therapeutic relationship. So as a therapist, if I had to speak to one of my patients, and if my patient was completely locked inside their bodies, dance might not be my answer for me to get through them. So I came across this field called expressive art therapy, which not only used dance, but used anything expressive that can tell your own true story, that can help you listen to your own inner voice. Because from when we were kids to when we are now, that little inner child within us has been so suppressed that we do not have any chance or any time to actually listen to our own inner voice. So expressive arts therapy uses, as I said, anything like dance, drama, clay, puppets, figurines, toys, anything that could be used to tell your story. And what's amazing about this work is that it's spontaneous. Nothing is meant to be planned. The moment you have a planned step, or the moment you're copying somebody, or the moment you're doing something with some kind of influence, it's not therapy. Therapeutic is when you and your body and yourself are there in its spontaneity. So expressive arts therapy works with everybody. There's a picture of me with some children I work with in Delhi who have cerebral palsy and autism. And this was during a Christmas play that we directed with them. And it's really powerful to see how children such as these, who can't really use verbal language, they are born with certain kind of special abilities, but for them to be in a social school setting and to be able to perform like other highly cognitively functioning children is tough. So for them, using expressive arts therapy essentially is very valuable because they find meaning in their lives. They find a way to communicate with the others, and essentially they feel extremely, extremely happy because they have got some sort of self-respect and self-esteem. So in expressive arts therapy, when you have a bunch of people, a lot of times people are stuck with some kind of judgments or stereotypes that, oh, if I dance like this, how will I be viewed? Or if I paint, I can't paint like M.F. Hussain. So a lot of the arts today is completely controlled by commercial viability. And all of us feel that if we cannot sell our art, we are not artists. But in my opinion, that's very, very wrong. All of us are born with a primate and innate ability to be creative, and we must not let that hamper our existence. This is a picture of a girl who used clay, and she made her own little secret garden. And every time she wanted to be herself, or she wanted to kind of let go of some kind of emotion, she would go to a secret garden and find her solace and peace. This is another lady I worked with, and she was asked to describe an inner conflict that she was going through using clay. And again, this is not a planned activity in the sense where she just starts playing with clay, and over time she made this image. And while talking about her work, she realized that she actually has body image issues. And after she did this expressive art activity, she was able to start talking about it and come to terms with what she was going through. So expressive art therapy also works very well with any kind of illness and any kind of disease and people recovering from it. So here you have a picture of a cancer patient survivor. On the right-hand side, you can see that she's drawn the inner turmoil and the inner cells and her chemotherapy and what her body has gone through. And on the left side, it's her external influence of the world around her. So when you go through a kind of a disease such as cancer, there's a lot that you're going through internally for yourself. And the way the outside world views you and how you have to deal with people is another added stress. So this is a way for her to describe her inner and her outer external influences. And I would work with her to actually find a way to merge, because as the shamans believed that if you find balance and wholeness, you find healing and recovery. So this is some pictures of how expressive art therapy works. Music therapy, you have a lady who's finding strength and hope, and on the left, somebody who's made a mask to describe what she's gone through internally and what she feels on the external aspect. This is another lady who I know very well, who's a cancer survivor, and she has used art to try and find and channelize healing light to come within her body. And she named this darkness to light, and she really, really used art in her journey of recovery to help her feel whole again. This picture is a quick example to show you how even magazines and just simple things that we see every day in our daily lives could be used to our advantage if we are telling our own personal stories. So this lady over here has taken a bunch of magazine photographs and has put elements of her life and has told her little story through magazines. This is a picture of a girl I worked who had severe depression. And when she was asked to work with toys and figurines, and she made this, she then realized and started speaking about how big of a problem it was that her parents favored her younger sister more than they favored her. And the positioning of her being a little far away from her parents was what we talked about, because she felt very neglected. And issues like this also come up a lot in expressive art therapy. Because essentially in expressive art therapy, it's your own inner subconscious that is being heard. It's these small, subtle things that you live in your daily life, but you never actually like accept it or talk about it or do anything about it. You quietly suppress it and just keep living your daily life. And in my opinion, when you suppress your emotions, it can lead to disease. So let's not try and keep anything inside us. Let's all find a time to express ourselves. Let's pick up crayons, pick up art materials, do whatever it needs to do, but don't keep emotions pent up inside. So the way art is taught in schools today is, in my opinion, very wrong. Art is very logically based. It's very theory-driven. Art is meant to be a journey. It's meant to be a process. Today, we are judged by how skillful we are, by trying to adhere to some kind of aesthetic form. But if I was doing an expressive art therapy session and I felt like doing dots or scribbles or splashing paint on my paper, that should be okay. And that's what our children in today's education system should be exposed to. They are sitting there in class and the teacher has complimented their neighbor for drawing a good painting, and they have decided that they can never ever paint for the rest of their lives because they are not good artists. Because nobody has said, "Beta, aap bahut acha draw karte hain." And if that's not happened to you, you spend the rest of your life believing that you should never ever pick up a paint or never pick up a crayon, because that's not what you're going to be in terms of your career. But that's not my point. My point is, take out time, introspect, think, express, because all of us need that little self-love. So there's this new disorder called ADHD, which is become very, very popular in today's schools. So a lot of psychologists and counselors are actually diagnosing little children with ADHD. And ADHD stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, where a child is very impulsive and they're very inattentive and they're fidgety. All these things are what normal young babies do. All children are inattentive and they're fidgety. But there's a very thin line which makes somebody a little more extreme. And counselors and psychologists want to drug these children. And they want to give them something called Ritalin so that their behaviors and their personalities are suppressed. Thomas Edison was thrown out of school in the 3rd grade on the grounds of being fidgety, inattentive, or slow. He had ADHD. If it wasn't for Thomas Edison, all of us would not be blessed with a light bulb in our homes. Imagine if he were drugged and his creativity was suppressed. Do you know who else has ADHD? You'll be shocked to know. Albert Einstein had ADHD. Will Smith, Jim Carrey, Michael Phelps, the founder of IKEA, the founder of JetBlue. I mean, the list is endless. Today, we live in a world where our creativity needs to be honored. Our true, authentic self needs to be expressed. Gone are the days where we can live our lives in silence. There's a very beautiful story that I heard from Sir Ken Robinson's talk. And there was a girl in a classroom who's making a drawing. And the teacher asks this little girl, "What are you drawing?" And she says, "I'm drawing God." So the teacher says, "But nobody knows what God looks like." And the little girl looks at the teacher and she says, "Well, they'll know in a minute." So this is the kind of things that children of today can be teaching us. And this is the kind of platform that we need to be giving our future generations. Every child is born an artist, in the words of Pablo Picasso. The only problem is remaining one as we grow up. Thank you.